This is the Inside BJJ EBI 11 recap.
Will the King, Gordon Ryan, bounce back from the previous loss and reclaim the throne for the Danaher Death Squad?
Will Gracie Jiu-Jitsu phenom Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani have what it takes to step up and get on the stage with the big boys?
Will MMA fighter and IBJJF competitor Vagner Rocha have what it takes to dethrone the King?
Will EBI 11 10th Planet qualifier winner Nathan Orchard step up to the plate and submit his way to victory?
Will Richie Boogeyman Martinez follow in his brother's footsteps and bring the strap back to the 10th Planet Freaks?
EBI 11 took place March 5th at the Florentine Gardens in El Monte, California, featuring 16 of the very best submission-only welterweights on the planet.
EBI 11 featured 9 submissions, 6 by way of strangulation, 3 leg locks, and 4 victories coming in overtime.
The first match of the round 1 bracket featured returning EBI 11 Absolute Division champion Gordon Ryan going up against the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu phenom Jean-Paul Lebosnoyani. The thing that was compelling about this match is that Gordon Ryan is only 21 years of age. By far, he's the youngest EBI champion, and he's going up against Jean-Paul, who's only 18 years of age, who is by far the youngest EBI competitor ever. In fact, this kid is so young, he's wearing his high school seniors wrestling Letterman jacket to the event. The match starts off just as we suspected. Gordon Ryan sits down. He starts working his butterfly guard, playing for arm drags, hinting a little bit at the Kimura, hinting a little bit at the back take. We see Jean-Paul does a nice fireman's carry type of a defense, actually, but still doesn't quite get away from Gordon Ryan. Gordon Ryan's attacks are calm and collected and straightforward, and they keep coming, and eventually Jean-Paul's defense can't keep up. It doesn't hold up, and he finds himself with Gordon Ryan on his back, hunting for the rear naked choke, and it doesn't take long for Gordon Ryan to flatten him out and get the tap to advance to round 2.
18-year-old specimen Jean-Paul jumps into deep waters and swims with a shark. It was a gallant effort, and at the end of the day, the kid has nothing to be ashamed of. But Gordon Ryan is an animal, and you can't let that guy get on your back. And in a great display of what Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is all about, Gordon Ryan takes Jean-Paul's back and beats him with a rear naked choke, even slicing his own arm up because Jean-Paul's teeth got in the way of the rear naked choke. Nothing was stopping Gordon Ryan from finishing that choke. He was a shark, and he smelled blood, and he got the finish.
The second match of the round 1 bracket featured Indiana Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's Chris McCarthy against Team Alpha Male's Dustin Akbari. Let me tell you something. Dustin came out like a man possessed. We saw Chris try to jump up for a jumping guillotine, and Dustin choke slams Chris to the ground. He immediately comes in with the knee slice attacks. Chris tries to counter with a leg lock attempt of sorts. He throws Akbari a tiny bit off of his game, but Dustin's right back to the knee slice attacks. He passes Chris's guard. He immediately jumps into a step over Kimura attack, and it looks like it's tight. It looks like he's going to get the finish, but we hear a grimace. We see a look of pain on Akbari's face, and a few seconds later, as he's trying to finish and Chris tries to scramble, Akbari has to tap. Akbari has to quit because he suffers a rib injury and he can't go on.
This match started out vintage Akbari. With speed, with power, with aggression, with pressure, Akbari was in control, snucking McCarthy to the floor, dominating, almost having the Kimura, and fate would not be on Dustin Akbari's side that night as he springs a rib injury when he was near to the tap out. That's a very, very tough position to escape. When Dustin Akbari has you in that Kimura, it's almost lights out, but his ribs give in, and McCarthy needs to thank the stars that night because for him, they lined up perfectly.
The third fight of the first round bracket featured Fight Sports Marcel Gonçalves against the Frias Zahibi Tristar standout Oliver Taza. Oliver wasted no time jumping for the leg attacks right out of the gate. Marcel hit a leg scissor sweep attempt of his own. It was back and forth. This was a classic match of two guys playing the game. They both had slick setups and slick defense, but nobody had the answer in order to get the submission. Now, both these guys go to overtime, and it's escape after escape after escape, with Goldslice winning finally in the overtime by escape time. This was a real back and forth. I'd love to see these guys back in action again.
There's not really much more to say than that. Other than these two guys were evenly matched. They had even technique, they had even cardio, even strength, even athleticism, and you get a match that goes the distance, that gets decided by time, but you're not upset because these guys were action-packed, going for it, back and forth, counters, attacks, and counters and attacks. This was an exciting match, and I loved every second of it.
The last match on the left side of the bracket features Dunham BJJ's Kyle Griffin, a veteran of EBI, going up against Dan Pavlovic from 360 BJJ. Let's get this straight. Dan came into this match as the underdog. Dan was aggressive right out of the start, jumping guard. Kyle immediately shucks him off, showing great defense, counters with a leg attack of his own, but Dan was no stranger to the great defense on that night. Dan ends up jumping into a triangle arm lock attack. It was very slick, and it looked like he might seal the deal, but Kyle's known for his arm lock defense. He pulls out, shoots another leg lock. It's back and forth with Pavlovic ending up on the mount. He's got a triangle Kimura variation, and he upsets the EBI veteran and gets the victory to move on in the EBI 11 bracket.
If a miracle happened and Gordon Ryan got struck by lightning and couldn't compete at EBI, the guy that everyone would have picked to win it would have been Kyle Griffin. Kyle Griffin made it to the last round of a previous EBI, even suffering a broken arm and refusing to tap. In this EBI, he gets his ticket punched by Dan Pavlovic in the first round, having to tap to the arm lock. You don't always get to tough it out in jiu-jitsu. Sometimes you get caught and you have to tap.
The first match on the right side of the bracket features American top team Atlanta, Sergio Ardea, going up against 10th Planet Freak, Richie Boogeyman Martinez. I gotta tell you, Matt, coming into this match, I really thought Richie Martinez was the odds-on favorite to win. In fact, I thought he was going to take home EBI. But Sergio Ardea, the lawyer, pled his case, and he had his idea for another outcome. And let me tell you, he came out aggressive with the wrestling, hitting some nice takedowns, some power doubles. He came out aggressive with the passing. He was all over Richie. He followed him all the way until the very end, hunting submissions with pressure, attack, until he finally caught the ankle with about 10 seconds left in the end of the match to get the submission and go on to the second round in EBI 11.
Boogie Martinez was definitely the fan favorite in EBI 11, but it just wasn't to be. It just wasn't Boogie's night.
The second match on the right side of the bracket features Vagner Rocha from VRMA going up against Joe Bice from Nice Guy Submission Fighting. And let me tell you, this was nothing but nice. Vagner came in with heavy knee slide pressure, using the crown of his head to grind it up against Joe Bice's mouth as a precursor to what was going to come when this match got into the overtime submission rounds. Vagner hit a mean cross-face choke right across the nose of Joe Bice, forcing him to tap. He had no answer when it was his turn, and Vagner went on to the second round in EBI 11.
Vagner Rocha came in and brought a nasty style of jiu-jitsu with head grinding, cross faces, pressure chokes, nose chokes, and look, Joe Bice is a tough guy. He put up a war against Vagner, but he's forced to tap or suffer a broken nose. And don't tell me that's not a legitimate submission. When your body is going to break, you tap. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. Vagner Rocha wins a tough match and deserves all the credit in the world.
Following match on the right side of the bracket features Dara OConnell from Burrows Jiu-Jitsu going up against Jose Yanis from Team Took. Listen, this match was back and forth the entire time. Each guy had his attack. Each guy had his counters. It went all the way into overtime with Dara OConnell pulling out the fastest submission to get the win over Jose Yanis. What can I say, folks? It's one of those matches where it was very even. These guys could easily go up against each other again and Yanis come out on top. But this night was a night for Dara OConnell.
There's not much more to say than that. O'Connell gets the victory in overtime.
The next match in the bracket features Craig Jones from Absolute South Yara going up against 10th Planet Portland's Nathan Orchard. Nathan Orchard is the 10th Planet EBI 11 qualifier winner. He blazed through the competition in stunning fashion to earn his spot on the night's card. But let me tell you something, Craig Jones had upset on his mind. He came to pull out the victory, and did he ever. He takes home the submission by way of inside heel hook to advance. He stunned Nathan Orchard, he stunned the crowd, and he moves on at EBI 11.
Another guy fighting on his home turf was Nathan Orchard. But Craig Jones did not care what turf he was on. He didn't care who the fan favorite is. He went out there. He brought a war to Nathan Orchard. It was a very entertaining match with Nathan Orchard using his technique, speed, and athleticism. But tonight, Craig Jones comes out on top with another major upset that night, defeating Nathan Orchard.
Jumping to the quarterfinals, the first match features Gordon Ryan from Brunswick Jiu-Jitsu going up against Chris McCarthy from Indiana Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Gordon Ryan came out and almost pulled a drunken jiu-jitsu style, catch and release, going for submission, but not sealing the deal, allowing McCarthy to get out until the very end when Gordon finishes with an arm-in guillotine. It looked like Gordon expended very little energy in this match to move on to the semifinals.
Gordon Ryan goes out there on EBI 11 in the second match of the quarterfinals, and he looks like he's just flowing, like he's just playing. He's not even putting on pressure. His whole body is loose, but his technique and his position and his timing is flawless. Tonight, he makes John Danaher proud, and he submits his opponent again in the first round.
The next match in the quarterfinals features Marcel Gonsalves going up against Dan Pavlovic. This match was exactly like Marcel's match earlier in the night against Oliver Taza. It was back and forth, each guy throwing out his attacks, throwing out his counters, throwing out his secondary attacks, and throwing out his secondary counters. It was back and forth all night. It went to the overtime, and Marcel was able to win it with fastest escapes to move on to the semifinals at EBI 11.
Nothing crazy or spectacular here. A basic back and forth match that Marcel wins in overtime.
The third match in the quarterfinals features Vagner Rocha from VRMA going up against the lawyer Sergio Ardea. Sergio Ardea was game, but Vagner Rocha came out hard with the knee slice game that he employed earlier in the night against Joe Baez. He drove and grinded and used pressure until he got the submission by way of palm-to-palm choke. Sergio was no pushover tonight. He was tough. He had already upset Richie the Boogeyman Martinez, and he was game. But Vagner Rocha is no joke. He came to battle. He came to squab. He came with static in his hands, and he walked away with a palm-to-palm choke to move on to the semifinals.
Vagner Rocha comes out again with a nasty grinding, borderline MMA style of also technical Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it should be no surprise that he gets a palm-to-palm choke and wins this match by way of submission.
The last match in the quarterfinals features Craig Jones going up against Dara OConnell from Ibero Jiu-Jitsu. Let me tell you, I did not expect Craig Jones to make it this far in the bracket. He was the standout. He had upset on his mind, and he came through with a slick knee bar to finish Dara OConnell in the quarterfinals and move on in EBI 11. What a refreshing sight to see this kid come out on the big stage and bring it home.
Another back and forth match that ends with Craig Jones getting a nasty knee bar in regulation, one of the few leg locks of the night.
First match of the semifinals features the King, Gordon Ryan, going up against Marcel Gonçalves. What can I say? Gonçalves, as great as he is, was in over his head. Gordon Ryan came to win, and it showed. He hit a nice back take and finished with his very, very well-known signature rear naked choke to take home the victory and move on once again to the EBI Finals.
You know, Tim, I can't agree with you more. Another vintage Gordon Ryan coming out there with superior technique. Hardly any speed or strength, but pure technique. Gordon Ryan looked fantastic, making, once again, John Danaher and the Death Squad proud.
The last match of the semifinals featured Vagner Rocha going up against Craig Jones. Let me tell you something. This kid, Craig Jones, is tough. Vagner tried to employ his knee slice, his grinding style, but Craig Jones managed to play the knee shield just well enough, defend and attack in the right balance to find the sweet spot to hold Vagner Rocha off. This match went to overtime, and Vagner ended up bringing it home with the fastest escape time. Craig Jones has got nothing to be ashamed of. The kid came out and kicked ass on the EBI 11 stage. I can't wait to see more of him. Vagner Rocha advances to the finals to meet up against the King, Gordon Ryan.
Vagner Rocha, Craig Jones, tough match, nasty jiu-jitsu, very competitive and back and forth. Goes into EBI overtime, and Vagner Rocha gets the victory and moves on to face the King, Gordon Ryan.
The finals features Gordon the King Ryan coming for the 170-pound belt to take it back to the Danaher Death Squad against Vagner Rocha from VRMA. Vagner is the guy that kicked AJ Agazarm off the stage. He didn't come to play. He came to win. But let me tell you, winning against Gordon Ryan is a tall task. We saw Vagner not able to employ his tight knee slice game that he employed earlier in the night. He chose instead to stay away at a distance, and it turned out to be a mistake. This match ended with a scramble, and Gordon Ryan jumping on Vagner's back ended up trapping his arm from the straight jacket and finishing with the rear naked choke to win EBI 11 and become the 170-pound welterweight champion.
Vagner Rocha and the King Gordon Ryan was the one match that everybody wanted to see, and this is the match that they got. Gordon Ryan's two previous matches, he was very dominant, smooth, and in control, and used his technique and never even broke a sweat or breathed heavy once. On the other hand, Vagner Rocha had tough matches that he grinded out. He comes into this match, and again, Gordon goes to flawless technique, gets the back, and another rear naked choke victory for the King Gordon Ryan, proving he's not just a guy that does leg locks. Long live the King Gordon Ryan.
And that's not all, folks. For the very first time, EBI 11 featured combat jiu-jitsu. This is jiu-jitsu with open hand strikes on the ground. The very first match featured MMA veteran Chad George going up against 10th Planet Bethlehem brown belt J.M. Holland. This match was great. J.M. played a very sophisticated and strategic sit-down guard game. Basically, he was in combat base. Chad George was oppressing and coming forward, swinging for the knockout. We saw J.M. able to pull guard, almost pulled the triangle off, almost hit the arm lock. There was another scramble, and eventually J.M. almost gets the leg lock. Chad George sneaks out, and the strikes start to accumulate. He passes J.M.'s guard and finishes with a Darce choke to move on to the finals in EBI 11's Combat Jiu-Jitsu. The second Combat Jiu-Jitsu match featured Nick Honstein going up against Sheridan Moran. This match was as tough as it gets. For every regulation EBI match that's a back and forth, The combat jiu-jitsu back and forth type match is twice as hard. These guys were slapping each other, going for submission attempts, hitting the counters, slapping each other some more, going for more submission attempts, hitting those counters, and slapping each other more. These guys beat the piss out of each other. This match went into overtime, and Nick Honstein was able to win, to pull it out, and move on to the finals against Chad George. If the first two matches in combat jiu-jitsu were not exciting enough, we've got Nick Honstein going up against Chad George. This match was all that and then some. Chad George came out extremely aggressive again, but Nick was having none of it. He defended extremely well and ended up winning the finals of the very first combat jiu-jitsu with a twister, the 10th Planet Eddie Bravo signature move. The house was brought to their feet in applause for Nick's effort. It was an amazing moment, and Nick Honstein walks away as the very first 135-pound combat jiu-jitsu champion.